So here it is, my people. The latest episode of Rick and Morty hit, and this one was controversial, but spoilers in 3, 2, 1. This episode was largely about life cycles, and I really had to examine the episode throughout this to understand it. As throughout the episode, there's a lot of very profane and very harsh humor, very traditional to Rick and Morty. And there's a couple mentionings that I don't really want to get into, which is the Twin Towers and Pearl Harbor. There's a couple really, really messed up jokes about that, but it ties into the life cycle of what's okay to make a joke about. And ultimately, this episode really is about life cycles, generational, comedic, and just in general. As the episode starts, we see Rick and Morty discovering that they have face huggers very similar to Alien, and that the basic premise for the species at one point was to just create life and die, work, create life and die, which ties into the joke early on in the episode about Our Greatest Generation, which is a joke about the U.S.'s world's greatest generation, as we like to call them, which is people who grew up in the 20s and 30s and fought for the world. However, ultimately, it's through Summer in this episode that challenges it with the millennial aspect of you don't have to just live, work, and die in order to be fulfilled. And by doing this, she actually builds a great society, and the aliens discover the kind of a universal idea of peace. It, this is ties into the life cycle of generational thoughts, and ultimately how each generation has a life cycle of what's considered okay and how we work. And the world's greatest generation did very much actually live, work, and die. That was They worked a job, they didn't like it, as long as they got paid. They deserve a lot of respect for that because I can't do that. But at the same time, it took a toll on a lot of people, and a lot of people live very unhappy lives. And now we have the millennial aspect of, you got to be happy in what you do. You've got to go for something more. And this episode very much looks into that and considers all realms of what this actually is. Now, there's another joke that they make that is clearly meant to be discussed online. I'm not going to take any personal argument against it, but the life cycle of a YouTuber is a very early on joke, which they assume that people become big, they sell out, and they start to spout nonsense and hatred. And yes, that has happened to some YouTubers, and it has ruined their lives. But the concept of this idea only works in certain elements, and this episode actually works on that because it was Rick's parasite that argues these points and is really driven more by the Rick mentality. There's also the concept of a love life cycle. Don't know why I couldn't say that. Where the idea of finding the one you love, wanting to be with them, wanting to start a family, and then finally reaching the end of your life after doing so. It's a very complex episode, and ultimately throughout the episode, there's a lot of jokes about that, and it ultimately is something that is argued to be very good. And a lot of people do argue that the idea of finding a family, making that family, finding the one you love, spending the rest of your life with them, it's very important for a lot of people. And ultimately, this episode really does have a consistent theme of life cycles, in the sense that everything has its due process, its time, and will eventually end. And that goes with families as well. And ultimately, I think this is a very good episode. It has some very crass, very intense humor, and definitely not meant for kids, and very different than what I was expecting from this episode. But with that, I'm going to wrap the video up here. Hope you guys had a good one, a good day. I'll see you guys in another video, and know that you are truly, truly my people. Bye.